Good evening and welcome to the stream this evening. Anybody that's watching? That's what we're working on this evening. So just putting my white gloves on again, as you can see. One of these days I'm going to be able to afford another one of these webcams. This one's here. And then that one can go back where it came from. So let's have a little bit more light, at least for the moment. Actually we'll have a bit more light altogether. There we go. Find the right tool, which is that one. I'm going to be doing, excuse me, I've just finished my tea and I keep having to clear my throat. What we're going to be doing is putting in this grass down this side here. And then once we've done that, I will probably be applying some green ink to the grass, and then maybe doing some more scraping on top of that to lighten the colour. And before I continue, I'm going to change my glasses. That will enable me to see the work just a little bit more clearly. Right, excuse me. Let me zoom in a little bit on what I'm working on, which will make it a bit easier for you guys to see rather than being looking at it from a long distance away. Now, I tilt this because it's easier to work at the correct angle. So now I'm afraid, well, I'm not afraid, but now it's a lot of little small scratches representing the grass blades. Of this lawn or field or whatever it is that's here. Now I need to be a little bit random in doing this, in that they're not all vertical, because otherwise that just creates sort of lines acrosswise. I've got to vary the angle very slightly. That way it fills in the space better and looks more like grass. Quite a slow process is this, because of the very tiny scratches that are needed to generate the grass look. But it is worth doing because it does look better than it would do with just sort of long scratches or something like that. After all, if I did really long scratches, it would look like the reeds here rather than the grass. Trying to be reasonably consistent with the brightness of the scratches, because the ink will look differently when put over the top of a lighter scratch than it will over a darker one. Obviously the green will be lighter, but equally well the amount of ink that I put on will also have an impact. So if I put lots of green ink on, it will, in one particular space, it'll look darker. So there's quite a lot of variables involved as to exactly how it will look at the end. It will be somewhat random. I can try very hard to be consistent with applying the green ink, but that doesn't mean I'll actually end up being consistent. When I look what I tried already, I thought I was reasonably consistent, but I've turned out not to be that so. But that's been okay. Now you are getting a really good view of what I'm looking at, because the camera's almost right next to my eyes. Fear Reaper 7, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. Nice to see you back again. I think I need to give this a bit of a sharpen. So I'm back on the grass. So how's the current project going for you, Reaper? I ideally need to find some sort of tool that stays sharp. This one is annoying me a little bit. Now it is one I've tried to sharpen, so maybe that's got something to do with it, but you do seem to go blunt in such a way that you start creating great big, well, relatively speaking, thick lines, rather than the fine ones that you're after, and you got while the tool was sharp. I just wondered how your project was going, Fear Reaper. just for a change I'm coming downwards rather than across, just to stop me becoming bored basically. But also I think it gives it a very slightly different texture than working across the page. If you work across the page you tend to end up with sort of visible lines, just because you start and end the strokes in more or less the same place, and it's quite difficult not to. Whereas if you come down, for some reason that doesn't seem to work, or at least it might happen like that in small sections, but when you do the next section across it's a completely different sort of start and finish position, so it doesn't show up. Oh, you're counting down a few more minutes. The exciting part just before it finishes. That is, unless it's like software installations that go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. You talk counting up percent as quickly as that, all the way to 99, and it goes 98, 99. And then 10 minutes later it's still on 99, and another 10 minutes later it's still on 99. And then eventually it just ticks the last one over and says done. One thing that kind of well, puzzles me in a way about things like 3D rendering. I can understand if you are combining different images together why a render would take quite a length of time, but to some extent the 3D modeling programs that I've seen render the 3D objects in real time. Whilst you're making them, you can spin it round as fast as you like, and it's there. Even to some extent, within the context of adding shadows and surface luminosities, surface textures, and things like that. So I'm kind of puzzled in a way why an actual output render tends to take so long to do. Because I kind of would have expected it, most of the work seems to have been done to produce what you see on screen anyway. Now what I'm going to do is sort of make it like an edging. So I'm going to come straight down here with a grass edge. Again, this is creating thicker lines than I'm happy with. Okay. Well, you're the expert on it. Then it's not something I've sort of dabbled, as I mentioned, with 3D design, modelling, 3D modelling, mainly for a model flight simulator. That's about the only use I've ever really put it to. And I just always seemed that no matter how zoomed in or anything like that, you got something that looked okay. But I mean, especially I guess there is a difference between a computer screen at 72 dpi and say a printout, which is going to be at 300 to 3000 dpi. So I guess that makes a significant difference. Yeah, and I do understand that ray tracing or backwards ray tracing and things like that does take quite a bit of calculation, especially with really shiny objects. It's just one of those things. You sort of, I guess, I've never done both. I've only used live rendering, if you like, because that's what went into the simulator, and they were live rendered there. So I've never actually done a high quality output render, so I've never seen the difference between them really. That almost made me jump, but it sort of did a little bit. Cancri Homestruck Lover. It's an interesting name. Thank you very much for following the studio. That's very kind of you. Interesting names people come up with. As this grass gets closer to the front foreground here, it can start to get a bit longer. You're starting to get a bit lighter. It's not especially something I want it to happen. That's happened because the scratches are getting thicker, and the thicker the scratch on, the more in a particular area is what makes the that area look brighter, and that's how you create the different shades. But didn't really want it to show up lighter. In that case, you won't be staying around. Bye. Yes, let's see if this okay, it's got a fine scratch again. Let's see if it will stay that way for a while. I really ought to see if I can find one of my honing stones rather than using the file each time. Whilst the file does do it, relatively speaking, it's quite a rough thing, even though it's a microfile, which is normally would be considered to be quite a fine file in terms of like polishing metal and things like that. It's quite a rough object, where something like a honing stone is a lot more finer cut on it, and will hopefully keep these tips a little bit sharper. I would get a scalpel out and do it, but I do know that the scalpel goes blunt just as quickly, and I don't have anything particularly to sharpen those unless I do get a honing stone out, because you can't easily sharpen them with the file. It'll just destroy the edge. I might have to move this camera. I keep knocking my glasses on it, as you can probably see. Maybe what I ought to get a hold of, if I could, was is some of those. You can get well, actually a HD camera that will actually clip to the side of glasses, so you actually get an eye position view of things. Often used for things like sports and people doing dangerous sport, or sports where things where they don't want their hands to be full of a camera. Might have to see if I can get hold of something like that. Then I can do away with this mount, but you still get to see what I'm looking at. And that would be a challenge to get the camera pointing in the right direction, because I'm not actually looking forward, I'm looking downwards. So I'm looking through the bottom of my glasses rather than through the centre, which is of course the actual position you should be looking through. The interesting things I've noticed with this tip, and I'm not sure if it's because of the sharpening or whether it's something inherent in the tool itself, but some of the scratches I'm getting is actually like two very fine lines side by side from this. I'm not quite sure why it's doing it. The other tip, which I was using earlier on, did exactly the same thing. The way I'm kind of filing this shouldn't really generate that, so could understand if I was filing upwards through a tip, or upwards, in that you can score it, but I'm not doing that. I'm filing towards the tip. Which should in theory mean that it couldn't do that. Mind you, theory and practice, not necessarily the same thing. Tomk. I think that's right. Thank you very much for following the studio. Most excellent of you, thank you. And we're quite close to finishing this section of grass, and then I'll get the ink out, and we'll colour this section in. Well, both sections actually, on both sides. Be a little bit careful I don't get too sparse. I want it to be quite dense grass. Definitely don't find this tool particularly helpful. It just seems to be creating thicker lines for no apparent reason. That noise is me filing the tip. I want a really sharp edge on it. The sharper the edge, the finer the scratch you can get. Now, it also does mean it wears down quicker, so there is a compromise to be made, but it is kind of wearing down too quickly. Now that could be just purely down to my style of art. I have a significant preference to working in very fine details and very lightly, and making it more prominent as I work through the piece. And so other people might actually have no problem whatsoever with something that I find, that I'm finding to be blunt. Somebody else may actually have absolutely no problem with it at all, just because they work in a different style or a different way. I love being able to create details, and half of my half of the skills that I need to learn are about when not to apply detail, when to work with, when to let something be rough, or on imaginary, for want of a better description. People who are watching, people who are looking at the art, often will supply some of the detail in their own minds without realizing it. And part of the trick of making some artwork really stand out is to make it so that people do that without realizing. They add their own details into the piece and don't notice that you haven't put them in. And of course then everybody sees it slightly differently that way, because it's from your own imagination that those bits are put in, and so you often see things which are relevant to you, sort of patterns or shapes or things like that. Which can make an artwork very personal to the person that's viewing it. Okay, so time to get out some green ink. which I should have over here. So I'm just going to take my gloves off because I don't want green ink on my gloves. I've already got a container to put it in, which I used the other night, and I should have a fine paintbrush over here, which is the one I used the other night as well, which despite me cleaning it has been stained green. Now with it being a stain rather than paint, it shouldn't affect it even if I use this to paint white, though I don't have any white ink. But if I painted a lighter colour or a colour that normally green would mix it with to give some sort of other colour, it shouldn't impact it because it's a stain, and once the stain is dried, that's it. It's fixed and it won't mix. So just for the minute I am literally going to put one drop in. Goes surprisingly long way. So rather than putting loads in and wasting it, because I hate wasting material, I can always put an extra drop in afterwards. So here we go, green grass. Now the far away I want to be light, so I'm putting more or less putting as little ink down there as I can get away with, and actually drawing it away, sort of pushing any excess at all down nearer to the front here. Brush it about dry. So I'm not putting a great deal on the brush, as I say. It goes a long way, does the green. And the brushes do soak up more than you might think as well, so now then, I just need to be a little bit careful here because I don't want to go onto the building. I want to get up to the edge of the building and not over onto the stones. Now I am overlapping what I've already done. I don't want to get a line across. In actual fact, that's just kind of reminding me that what I should be doing here is making sure I don't get a straight line across the bottom while I'm doing this, because that will tend to make it stand out. You'll see the straight line. We do it down the edge of the building. Now this stuff at the back here is probably a bit dark. So what I fully intend to do is, once this ink has dried off, which will take a few minutes, what we'll do is we'll go back and scratch some of the green away and expose a little bit more of the white again and see how that looks. That should cause it to look like a very light pale green. I do say should. I have no experience of doing this, so if it doesn't, we'll just put more green back over the top. This is on this piece, this is the first time I've used colour, so I've no real idea what it's going to come out like. It looks a bit more like a sort of tallish sort of grass, like in a field rather than lawn, or it does to me at the moment. I'm going to try and make sure that just this around this edge here we have a little bit more ink than we've got elsewhere. That'll make it a touch darker, which will help with the illusion of it being close. We'll see how that goes. Now what I'm going to do is colour in some of these, well, all of these little tufts of grass around here as well, which is why I started on this side first and work this way, because I'm right-handed, so I don't put my hand on ink that's drying and rub it onto some area that I didn't want it on. Now where this goes over the top of stones, I'm being careful. I don't mind some of it coming off because this is just kind of representative of grass going over the top of the stone on the wall. So if I colour a little bit of the wall, it won't really, well, it doesn't really matter. But I am trying to sort of just touch the blades of grass. Now down here where I've got black as the background, it matters less because you won't see the green on the black. In a bright light you might see a little bit of more shininess from it, but generally speaking it'll be almost completely invisible. And I'm also trying, well, not trying, but I'm allowing the green to sort of be variable shades around the grass blades. So I'm not trying to make them all identical, shade of green. If they come out slightly different, that's fine. Obviously the leaves, as they twist or twist different twists, they will reflect light slightly differently and therefore look to be darker, some darker than others. So this I try not too hard to make them all the same, then I will get that sort of effect. Now they will be darker towards the root than the tip, so I can sort of add a little bit more green down near the bottom. Now this of course is taking longer than doing the big areas of grass, because I don't really want to just slather it all over the place. Excuse me, I am sort of concentrating quite closely on this. Good evening, welcome back, Fear Reaper. Now you might not be able to see it, but the tip on this brush is really fine. I'm almost trying to paint individual scratches. And that's because I don't want to leave a lot of residue on the black. Because it will show up if you look you will be able to see it if you look closely enough. So the less I leave, the harder it is to see. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. Ah, that's good. I'm glad you're pleased with it. That's the main thing, isn't it? Right, I think the ink in there is actually dried, so I'll put another drop in. I am of course hoping Fear Reaper 7 that we'll get to see this new piece of art, but without me actually saying, please can I see it? Oh dear. You've been doing some amazing stuff with the both the animations obviously and the two static images that you rendered. The hospital corridor and the Tron-like car. They were both quite amazing images, and I'm kind of subtly sort of trying to get you to stream it one day so we can see. Oh dear, let's have a look. That doesn't mean I am not that does before I saw the image, that doesn't mean I'm not interested in your art just because I'm not interested in Lord of the Rings. Thank you. That is actually it is a really beautiful image. Thank you. I don't know if you have done that for, what's the word I'm looking at, to do with the jewellery, as in the rings that I use for the jewellery, or whether it was just Lord of the Rings, and the trilogy thing, and you've put the name on it. But that looks absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. If you would like, and I would certainly appreciate if I could have a copy of this just for my own, to put on a backdrop or look at occasionally, or maybe even put on my wall. One of the things that I am that you've literally just made me consider is that things like that are absolutely beautiful, and what I would like to do, if you are happy with it, is I mentioned I'm building a website, and what I would like to do is to put a section on there, I think, to do with images that people have done for me or for the stream, or for that includes Aragon art in some way, and include that with attribute it to you. In this particular case, obviously if somebody else did it, it would be attributed to them, but if you'd like that and happy for me to do that, then I would like to. If you're not, then I won't, but I would appreciate if I could have a copy of the file just for me, not to show unless you wanted it shown, because that's absolutely fantastic. In fact, thank you. Thank you, if you wouldn't mind. That way I get the best definition file. Doesn't matter the size, other than what email will handle it. Doesn't matter what the size is. I am half thinking whether or not to maybe that's an interesting idea as well, whether to sort of put it into something like either the starting plate or the ending plate on a stream, with at the moment it's you, but if anybody else does anything like that, to put it into sort of a picture roll at the start or the end of the stream. Because I'd love to showcase some of this, some of the stuff that you do and anybody else does. And I'm looking at this image that in front of me now here. That's sorry, my image now, because yours is amazing. I don't know if it's the lighting, and the camera is certainly showing it slightly differently to here in real life. And I'll have to sort of stand back maybe at the end of the stream and take a look at this, but that doesn't half look like it's a field going into the background. It's quite and looking like it's got quite long grass. This kind of looks more like a lawn, short grass, but it really seems to be as though it wraps around the back of the cottage. I am really pleased with that. And I've got ink on here, so let me use it before I daub it somewhere that I didn't mean it to go, especially since it's drying. Thank you very much. Well, I won't look at it. I won't fire mail up until after the stream. But thank you, and I'll let you know as soon as I make the site live. I'll let you know, so you'll be able to have a look. I love the way you've got the glow in and into the letters. I know they're the power symbols on the rings, but I think that glow looks really good. So it really gives the impression that the symbols really have a lot of constrained power built into them. I think you've really captured that excellently. I know in practice this green, especially around this grass here, is ridiculously luminous and bright for where it is, but I think the exaggeration looks quite good. I can tell I'm starting to concentrate quite a bit. I'm starting to stick my tongue out. Okay. Okay, yeah, there's a heck of a lot more noise in there, isn't there? On the ring itself, that's an interesting effect, though. You know, the stone and the background, not so much. But it would stand out to me as such. The stone looks a little odd. It's almost as though at the 10 point render, the stone has been scattered with fine sand, but it gives the ring kind of like a brushed effect, which in itself is quite a nice effect. But yes, now I can see the significant difference between the two, because I'm just flipping between them, and yeah, quite a bit of difference. Okay. The sort of stuff I've been doing then just didn't show that sort of thing. And you also I'm about to say something, I don't know whether quite whether it applies to the sort of stuff you've just done there, Fear Reaper, and that is when I was doing the modelling for the model simulator. We were working we were working with triangular polygons rather than quads, and trying to keep the count down, significantly down, because of the need to render them in real time. So I'm guessing that also means that there probably isn't a lot of difference between a high quality render of that particular object and the live rendering of it, because the count, the polygon count is relatively low, like in the order of a few thousand. Agreed, but it was made indestructible once it was imbued with power, which was after it was constructed, if I remember correctly. Therefore, and I think it's the runes around it, isn't it, that imbued the power. Therefore, it could have been made in a brushed format and then imbued with the power and made indestructible, and therefore it would be pristine rough. If you see what I mean. Yeah. And of course the model thing, I wasn't so much worried about things like environmental reflections and things like that. I seem to remember it did a little bit. So you got a vague amount of the environmentals in the model, and of course a lot of models are relatively flat surfaces as well, so that in itself makes the calculations a bit easier. So there was a relatively small number of normals on the model as well. Now I need this over here to be quite pale again, so I'm dragging the ink away. from the top surface here as much as I can anyway. It's really surprising just how far a little bit of ink goes. Don't know if you ever remember, oh, I'm just trying to think now, what was it called, a UK programme with Tony Hart, but I'm trying to think, it wasn't Take Heart, there was something, there was a programme that he was on before that where they used to have a gallery, and the music for the gallery that they played was quite became quite well known, shall I say. And I can't actually bring the music to mind, but I recognise it when I hear it. And sort of in the middle of the show, they always had this gallery of images that viewers had sent in. It was a children's television programme, but I'm kind of thinking I could almost do with doing something like that right in the middle of the stream. Just stop for 5 minutes and just show some of these pictures. Rendered it with 20,000 samples per pixel. That's one heck of a lot. Now that sort of puts into perspective just why it takes so long to do the render. I'm going to have to look for that music and just see if maybe I can get a license to use the music, provided it doesn't cost a lot of money. So doing the all of the green on here has literally taken less than 5 drops of ink to do all of the green. I was thinking that the bottles would probably get used up fairly quickly. I'm now thinking I'm probably going to have those bottles for years. I'm just going to add a little bit more ink down here because I've got some vertical lines showing where I sort of did like a panel. So I just want to sort of disguise them a little bit. one thing always to watch when you're painting or scraping, and I mean I can see it here. I've got a line of where the grass was, and you can see that dark patch there. It stands out, and so something to it's always a problem with airbrushing, with pyrography, and obviously with scraping as well, not to get these hidden lines in there which come from where you start and where you end a particular stroke of whatever tool it is that you're using. Oh, well, sci-fi or space was one I suggested last time, wasn't it? So, I was thinking of doing some next time to do a Scraperboard thing. I was thinking of doing a space theme, because I've just been photographing the Earthrise one that I did, and I was kind of thinking, I wonder what something like a deep space thing, and some sort of spaceship would look like on the black with with stars and stuff. So, or perhaps in my case doing like the typical quadrant planet in the one side, because I've got all these ink colours, and I can sort of just play about with ink colours. Sci-fi why though? What would be? Ooh, I tell you what, I would probably. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, which would take a long time to render, I suspect, and that would be a laser boosted solar cell. Now that would be a lot of work. Because the solar sail, of course, would be highly reflective, and the laser would be invisible in space, but you'd want to make it visible and glow with power. Sci-fi. Fairly. So you're looking for a fairly simple image. Yeah, especially I'm gonna say it's odd in space. Everything seems to be streamlined apart from the Borg cubes. Because I was kind of thinking things like a flying car, but that's still a streamlined object, and it's still a relatively complex thing to do. What you could do, yeah, I agree. I kind of do that as well. I don't know if that's because I've seen so many of the Star Trek ships, and therefore you immediately think of them when you think of space, or it's because those ship designs are what I think of as space, and therefore they resonate with what I think, and therefore that's what I see. They are massive, that's true, but you don't have to make them massive. And of course, the closer you the thing that was crossing my mind, if you know something, like on Star Treks with the phasers, or a pulse rifle or something like that, what you could, for example, do, or even just a standard standard gun, is you could just do the muzzle, and the if you're talking about you're talking about a gun, you could do the muzzle flash, but with something like a pulse rifle or a phaser, you could do the emitter and the light beam that comes out of it. And if spaceship wise, for example, you don't actually have to do all of it. You could just do a very small section, like for example almost as though you're looking in a window. In fact, actually, I seem to remember one of the artists that I've actually got some prints from at one point, and it's what just brought the thought just brought to mind was he did an art piece actually from inside a spaceship looking out through I think probably a next gen ship, because what it is, it's an old Spock looking out through the window, but you don't see him looking out through the window. What you see is his reflection in the window, which was but essentially the whole picture is just the window with the reflection in it, and you can sort of use something like that, which is recognizable. So you could take something like the front end of one of the engine nacelles of Next Gen, for example, the red, I guess it's a Bussard hydrogen scoop, but the red bit at the front, or the blue bits on the original series, and do some, and just a bit of it, if you like, with a star scene behind it or something like that. So that's one way of getting around the massive thing without actually doing the massive thing. But it's really hard to think of something which is sci-fi. You tend to think of what somebody's already done in terms of the films that you've seen and things like that. I'll have a think at the moment. I'm just going to go wash out my brush. To anybody that's watching, before this sort of totally dries, I'm just going to go rinse it out, so I'll be back in a moment. You're gonna, yeah. I kind of know what you mean. Well, I mean, it's an interesting challenge to come up with a spaceship of a different sort of design that's not immediately a Star Trek ship of some kind. But there again, there's nothing to stop you also just borrowing from that genre, and it's something in that universe. I'm just looking to see whether this ink is. It looks dry. It is dry. But because you kind of want to your art would seem to be a scene, kind of like mine, I guess, rather than an object. So you're kind of looking for a sci-fi scene. Again, I keep thinking of things like Star Trek, because of course, like the transporter effect was a thought that just came to mind there, but it's Star Trek again. What do I think of as? Well, I'm everything I think of is either something I've read in a book or seen somewhere. I don't know, some of it's not exactly sci-fi, but you could you could potentially do something like I think it's the Voyager probe, the NASA Voyager probe, have no idea what that looks like, but you could make up something like that as an image in space. So make up your own design, a design of something like that. Again, that's more science fact rather than science fiction. But I was thinking of stuff on Mars. Depends on how. You could design your own life form. What science fiction? I mean, some of the weird science fiction things have come into normal life now. I mean, the flip-top phone came. I remember reading someone that I can't remember who first brought the phone. Probably Nokia, I suspect, first brought out the flip-top phone, and the designer of that said he wanted a Star Trek communicator, so that's why that came into being, and they could do it, and it gave more space and things like that. Don't know. I am going to try. I'm going to try adding some scratches over the green. So what I'm doing here is sort of scratching away some of the green and revealing some of the white underneath. I'm doing that because I want that far thing there to be a little bit paler, and also there's a couple of lines that I want to get rid of. Okay. Inorganic. Sci-fi. Floating building came to mind, and then I suddenly thought of Ringworld, which was a book by Larry Niven, I think it was, which is a ring around a sun, so not a Dyson sphere which totally encloses the sun, but just a ring. It's an interesting image. It is surprisingly difficult. Well, I think it's surprisingly difficult. But that's kind of a problem I always have, is trying to come up with, well, same thing, trying to come up with a concept of something to do art about. look like? That looks interesting. Sure is. It sure is, yeah. And I'm going to have to come up with one for... Oh no, for the Punchcraft I can probably do an A4 Pacific locomotive like the Mallard, which is because Punchcraft I think is the next thing we'll do once this is finished. Which may well be tomorrow or the day after. It's got me stumped. There were times like the other night where lots of ideas started coming to mind, and then tonight they're not really flowing. How about something like a fusion reactor? That would be science fiction at the moment, and since one's never actually been built as such, you could do more or less what you like. Now I'm just going to see if I can cheat and make this dark line across there disappear. Now it's dark because there isn't quite as many scratches in the area, so it's showing dark because of the black background underneath the ink. So what I'm trying to do here is just put an odd fine scratch in, just to line it up a little bit and hide that edge. Sort of like a bit of a cheat, because it's disguising it in a way. I say a cheat, but it's, you know, it's part of the art form. Make it look like I want it to look. Which it now does. And it's 10 o'clock at night, which means it's quite it's actually around about the time to end the stream as well. Let me zoom this camera out. Let's take a look at this this cottage now. I think this lightness here probably wants to just be extended a little bit, feathered out a bit. It's a bit too in one place. It sort of wants to sort of be a gradual fade, and that's a little bit too abrupt. So we probably want to do a little bit on that, just to make it sort of not as sharp a transition. A little bit the same on this here as well. It's still a little bit sharper transition. Kind of hidden the line that I had, which I'm pleased about, and this now just looks like a darkish band of grass, which is fine. I'm rather pleased about the way it's now made the cottage jump forward. It really looks three-dimensional now, as though, you know, it stood in front of this grass. You can almost quite clearly see it. It's really sort of, to me anyway, looking at what I'm seeing on stream, it's really sort of jumping out of the page. It's almost as though it is jumped out in real life here, which I am really quite pleased with. And the grass really does look to go behind it. So I am really pleased with that. I think actually adding the green in has made a significant difference to it. I don't think it would have looked as good if I'd left those areas white. And I think sort of the little tufts of grass in front of the cottage as well just sort of tie that area down, without me actually having to put a lot of detail into there. So it just kind of looks a bit like soil with stuff growing up through it. Still have to do something with the windows, I think. Not really sure what I want to do with those. I think probably just hint at some sort of grey reflection maybe, just so that you can see there's a pane of glass in there. But otherwise we are probably next stream this will be finished. Thank you very much for that, Fear Reaper. That's most kind of you. It's really difficult. I was photographing the other two pieces that I've done this afternoon or yesterday. It's really hard to photograph this Scraperboard, because the black is, whilst it's matte, it's reflective. As you can see, you're picking it up there. It's picking up one of my spotlights in the roof, and this area down here is picking up reflections from some of the centre lights. It's really hard to photograph this stuff without some sort of reflection getting in the way. This has kind of got a feel to me of something like something out in the moorlands almost. I mean, I know we've got grass around it rather than sort of heather and stuff, but it sort of seems to be quite a remote location. Interesting how images bring a feel to mind. Doesn't quite look abandoned, but it does look like somebody sort of left the door open. Anyway, guys, really pleased with that. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to say good evening to you. If there's anybody watching that isn't following, I do of course encourage you to do so. And thank you to the Cancry Homestruck Lover. Actually, it's T0MGK, but Tom for watching, for following. Quite welcome to follow me on Twitter as well, because I tweet when I go live. And if you'd just like to catch me tomorrow night, I will be on from approximately 8 PM, give or take certain events. 8 PM is about 2 hours ago, in whatever time zone you're in. So if you'd like to catch me, subtract 2 hours from the current time, that time tomorrow night, and I should be around. Thank you all, have a good evening, and again, thank you for watching. Bye bye.